I think it's given a number between 0 to 100. Um, write a function that will return the numbers from 0 to 100 that have the number 2 in it. So for instance, 2 has number 2 in it, 12 has a 2 in it, 20 has a 2 in it, 22 has a 2 in it, but technically it only will count for 1. So
But when you do 20, 21, 22, 23, 24.
those all count.
Yeah.
Correct. So if you were to write a method without even touching a line of code, but like what we call pseudocode, a lot of the interviews you go to, you go to the whiteboard and you'll just scratch out kind of what you're thinking. Um, does anyone have any ideas of what you would do, counting from 0 to 100? And yep.
You could do it two ways.
Okay.
So you could like iterate like loop and
Yep.
count each number like one to like do a range function from like 0 or 1 to the top number. And then each time you loop through, you can see if it contains a 2.
Mm-hmm.
And if it does, add 1 to your tally.
Okay.
Or you could figure out, it'd be a little more complicated, but like, you know, in the 20s range, like how many numbers that would be, 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you could figure out how many numbers would have, like, you know, your 12, 32, 42, but yeah, that way.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Mathematically speaking, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of an algorithm, like mathematically speaking, how you could figure that out. I couldn't think of anything. All I could really think of is doing the first way, of just literally counting each number and then keeping a running count and then incrementing the count every time you encounter a 2. And if you really needed to increase the speed of that, what you could potentially do is if you have 100,000 records and you need to count the number of 2, obviously you can't go through all of them all at once. What I would do is maybe break it up into 10 different processes and then run them all parallel. It's called parallel processing, where you break up the number of things you're going to do and then you just run it all together at once and it comes out with one number. So process number 1 would count 1 through the first 1,000 or whatever and whatever. And you would all run it at once and you would come out with one number at the end. That's the only thing I could think of, unless there's some super cool math thing you could do. So for that idea, what I wanted to do is start a new project and just write that code out real quick and see if that is correct. So I will start a new project. And single view app, and it will be math stuff. And I'm going to include unit tests, and all that's going to do is create this little guy down here. And this is another thing you can do with unit tests is you can test performance. So you can actually test the speed of your code. I'm not going to show that particular thing today. But in setting up your tests, you have these two methods that will run before each individual test is actually run, and that's what's called a setup. So you could do certain things like resetting the count down to 0, stuff like that, each time you wanted to run your test. But in this case, I'm just going to create a new file. We'll just call it math stuff. And I will create a. I'm actually just going to create a function that returns the number. So it'll take in. So number of 2s, and it's going to take in some stuff. And let's just see if I can build this. I'm not sure if I can. I think you can. You can. Okay. So it's going to take in. Let's just say it'll take in the max number, like the range, the top. I don't know what you would call that, but I'm just going to call it max number. And so I'm going to start writing the method. So first we need a count. I'm going to initialize it to 0, and then I'm going to do for 0 to. If we're doing 0 to 100, we want to include 100. You just do the 3 dots and max number. And I'm going to end up returning this count. And so when we return the count, we will just return an integer. And so
Don't you have to initialize max number to 100?
I'm going to do that in the test itself.
Okay.
Do you need to declare count as being like an integer type? You know, do you have to say count like colon integer or something?
It says cannot call value of non-function type int. For 0. These are always so weird. Sorry. The for loops in Swift are kind of weird. There we go. That's how you write a for loop. And I will need this number, so I'll just call it number. For number in 0 to max number. And I'm going to convert the number to a string. So string number. And then if it contains 2, so if it contains 2, just increment the count. Build. So the build succeeded. Now what I want to do is in this unit test, we are going to test whether the number is. Let's start with 0 to 10. 0 to 10 should just be 1, right? So test first 10, and so first off, this is a class called XCTest, and what is actually happening here is these are tools that you can use to test your source code. So all these files right here are considered your source code, and this is what gets compiled into your program. Everything that you would put in this folder is not part of your source code. So when you throw your source code upload your source code to the App Store, these files will not get sent because they'll just bloat your app size. What these are really for is they're tools for you to just verify for yourself that your code works. So I will do XCTest stands for Xcode test. And what you want to do is you XC assert. So what you end up doing is you start asserting things, and so when I run this, assert. There's different methods you can use for assertions. You can assert equal, assert not equal. You can assert true. All sorts of different tools you can use. For this particular one, I'm going to just do a true statement, and I'm just going to. What it does is it takes in a boolean, and so what you end up wanting to do is give these XCT functions some sort of parameter. In this case, I'm just going to give it false just to show you what actually happens. So when you run your unit tests, what you do is you can come to this tab right here, and you can see that it's about to run this test, and it's going to try to assert what you give it, and because I give it false and it's trying to assert true, it should fail. So there it goes. It says test failed. You get this nice red X right here in your test navigator. And so what a lot of us do at Monsanto is before you commit to your repository, you make sure that the unit tests are all succeeding. The reason why you use unit tests, I didn't talk about that, I guess, is you want to guarantee that your code maintains functionality. It's a great way to fix bugs and fix them forever. So what you'll end up doing is you'll write the test that fixes your own code, and it'll lock that functionality in your application through various versions of your app. So if I fix a bug in version 2 of my app, and then I don't write a unit test for it, you're still kind of leaving trust out for your other teammates to not go in, change your code. You don't, I mean, I can't possibly watch all the files of my code. That's what this does. This watches all the code for you, and by running this test, it'll be like, no, I meant to do this. And so when you see failures in your code, you'll go back and be like, oh, okay, I kind of see why he wrote this unit test a certain way. Um, I can't think of any examples, but really, it really locks in the functionality of your code. Um, for example, I think you had a problem where you were clicking a button and her card was flipping over, and I think if she flipped it again, the card didn't show, like something
It stayed on the same card.
stayed on the same card.
Kept flipping, but
So,
it stayed on the
so
same
really,
card.
what she wanted to do is every time she flipped it, it would show the front. Flipped it, show the back. Flipped it, show the front. You can write a unit test, do a for loop, flip it 100 times, and make sure that you're seeing what you're supposed to be seeing. You can write a test for that, and that's a unit test. You're testing a small component of your application, and so if you write that unit test, someone else comes into your code, changes it, the test will fail for them, and then you guys can talk to each other and be like, I'm failing your unit test. What was the purpose of you writing it this way? And then at least that way you're alerted before you send it to the App Store, and your users are finding bugs. You don't want your users finding bugs, or your bosses will get kind of on your tail about that. So for this one in particular, right now it's just I'm just sort of asserting true. What I'm going to do is number of twos is going to accept a max number, and I'm going to give it 10. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assert equal. So the number of twos for 0 to 10 should be 1. Let's see if it works. I'm clicking the little button. This is actually a button, so it succeeded. This right here is a button, so if I click it, it just runs the test itself.
So you're not clicking that run button up on the top left?
No, this will start your program. This is not starting your program. It's just testing a small piece of it. So really, what it's doing is it's just running. Let me set a breakpoint here. I'll save this as a variable.
So the way that's written out, it actually looks a lot like a Java unit test.
Yeah, unit tests are. I can't think of the word synonymous or. You want to unit test any language you have. So JavaScript, Java, Scala, every language has unit test frameworks for you to test your own code. It's really the best way for you to verify that your code works. When you're dealing with data, sending it over a network, you want to make sure you're sending the right data. So that's one of the areas that you want to unit test your stuff the most. Is whenever your app creates a card or a deck or something like that, you're sending it to a database. You want to make sure that's in the right format. So strings are supposed to be strings, numbers are supposed to be sent as numbers. You wouldn't believe the chaos that my team created, that I'm now having to go through the database and fix a bunch of stuff because we didn't send all of our data in the right format. You also want to just make sure that the data is even being sent in the first place. It's really the best place for you to just verify that your stuff works. So yeah, unit tests are they're for every single language, and they're the best way for you to test everything. So for this instance, I'm going to just save this this result of this method into this thing called result, and it's still going to run the same way it did before. It's just going to save it into this variable. But what I'm going to do is set a breakpoint, and what this will do, and what's nice about this is, think about trying to set breakpoints in your code and getting to the screen that you have to go to test that stuff. That's what I did when I first started programming. Was I worked on a disposable camera app where you take a photo. First off, you have to buy a camera roll, and so it was $12, and you bought a camera roll of 27 photos. And once the number got down to 0, what we did is send your photos up to an AWS bucket, and then we had a company in California that actually, this is completely automated. They printed out the photos for you and mailed them to you. So it was a disposable camera app that your photos would show up on your doorstep. And the way I was testing it was I'd have to get, buy a camera roll, write some code in there so I didn't actually have to spend money, get to the camera roll, click the button 27 times, and it just took way too long. Imagine trying to do that in a huge app. Development would just take forever. What this allows you to do is um, test a little bit of your component immediately. So I click the button, I'm already about to go into number of twos. This number of twos could be hidden way deep in your app, 4 or 5 pages long, so it saves you a lot of time that way. So now I'm actually in here.
How'd you get there?
I,
Clicked on it?
yeah, so I set a breakpoint right here.
Uh-huh.
I click run, and so now it's going to start this up, and
Right.
it's I'm on this line of code, and so using this debugger, when I click step into,
Step into
it's going to
okay.
step into the number of twos method. So now I'm in it, and you saw right here
It jumped.
the max number I gave it was 10. So now this max number right here should be 10, and it actually says it right here, 10. And so, like I said, it's going to run over this 10 times.
Right.
The count is 1. So 3.
It tells
Now
you
the
what
number's
number you're on. I
number's
see
5, number 6, and you can see that it's jumping over this line, so it will not hit that breakpoint for the rest of it because there's no twos.
that. Right.
And eventually you'll get to return the count, which should be 1. And if I step over it, it's going to take me out of the method. My result is now 1, and when I assert 1 is equal to 1, this will pass. If I try to assert 0, it's going to fail. So what I'm doing is I'm writing this test to make sure that my code works. So for this one, I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to say, so let's see here, 30. 30 should be, okay, so there's 2, 12, and then all the 20s, right? So 20 goes from, what is that, 10 of them?
Yep.
So there should be 12. So let's run this again. One thing that I learned from a place I used to work at is you're supposed to make your unit test fail first. So I'm going to make it fail first. Obviously, the result here should not be 0. The result is actually 12. So you can see that this passed. It skipped over this line. My actual failure is here, and it says XCT assert equal fail, 12 is not equal to 0. So the way to make this pass, obviously, is to turn that into 12. Now I have a good unit test. So if someone did this in front of me at an interview, I'd be like, that's great, we can totally use this guy. Just for the mere fact that he can write a method and then guarantee that his method works. That's really what we're looking for. If you can't do table view stuff, it's like, okay, that's kind of funny, but you can learn that in 30 minutes pairing with somebody. And if you forget, you just ask them again, or you just Google it. 100, I'm not really sure what that would be. I guess we could do it real quick. Because we did say the problem was to 100. So for 30, it was 12. Everything else is just like
Two, yeah. So,
just another 2, right?
yeah, 32, 42.
So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
That's it.
So
'Cause
12.
you won't hit 10 again.
12 plus 6 is 17. So it's 18?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's see what it is. We'll just run a test and see what it gives us. It was 19.
19.
So we missed some 2s somehow.
30, 40, 50,
Oh, so
60,
yeah, I missed the 3.
70, 80, 90. So 7 plus
The 12.
12 is
19. So you can kind of see that this works. What I wanted to do, it's an Apple TV app. Okay, so what I wanted to do now, I guess, was I have, and this was our old tech exercise that you would have to take at Monsanto to get a job. I'm only going to show you a portion of this. What we had you do at Monsanto for iOS position was we wrote some tests. Let me start a new file. Math stuff 2. Oh, whoops, sorry. Okay, so this was something we called humanized tests. And one thing that's actually happening here is uh, your app container is here. The unit tests are sitting here. The unit tests have to talk to your app somehow. So whenever you build your app, you're actually building a program, and it's going to come out the same name that you named your application. So that'll be somewhere.
Messed up.
Todd, do you know where it is? I think that's it. Oh, no. Oh, I know where it is. Module. Here it is. Your product module name. Whenever you compile your code, it's just. Have we gone over any of this stuff that's in this tab right here? This guy right here. It's part of like iOS DevOps, and you'll want to start learning this stuff as your career goes on, and you start getting these things right here, these compile errors. This one's saying no such module iOS tech exercises. It's because I copied this straight from a different project where this one was called iOS tech exercises. This one is called math stuff because I named it that. But if you ever wanted to go find the name of the module, you can come into this tab right here, go to build settings, and then you can actually start searching for stuff up here. So I just typed in module, found the name, it's math stuff. And now when I come back here, I'm importing math stuff. So the way your unit test can read in the code from this folder cannot talk to this folder. The unit test cannot talk to this folder unless you have this line of code in there. If I remove it, it cannot read. It cannot read these files. There's no way. So that's just something you have to include. And so this is some of the tests that we gave you this file, and you had to make all of these tests pass. So I guess we'll do that real quick. I'm just going to go back to here. I'm going to create a new class called Humanize. And Humanize has a method called Humanize. It looks like it takes in some sort of parameter, and it should return a string. You can see that the assert equal is asserting something on a string. So I will create a method that does that. So function humanize, it took in some sort of parameter, I don't know what it was. I'm just going to give it string, and it's going to return string, and I will return empty string. And if I run these tests, where'd they go? Oh. It should compile now. Missing argument label param. Okay, so I'm missing an argument label. I am just going to give it no argument label for this one so that it's the same thing as this test, and I will run it. And we will see how many tests fail, and now our job is to make them pass. The first two we get for free. The last three we will have to do. So nil returns empty spaces. If you give it empty spaces, it'll return empty spaces. This is failing. Do you guys have any ideas how to make this test pass?
Well, for one, you have an uppercase F
Yep.
versus a lowercase.
That's correct. So I guess to get this test to pass,
You have
the simplest
to,
thing you could do,
You have to ignore.
couldn't you just return foo? But then the first two fail, right?
Right. You'll have to ignore capitalization.
Ignore the capitalization?
Yeah.
It's only the first character.
Yeah.
That gets
So the what I'm giving the function is FOO all lowercase, and what it should return is a capital F and then lowercase
Oh,
zero.
that's what it needs to return.
Yes,
Okay,
that's correct.
So you'll have to capitalize the first letter.
Yes. So I will try to do that. Okay. So
An if statement.
yeah, do you want to loop over all the letters that it's going to take in and just capitalize the first one or something, or what are you thinking?
Well, looking at the other test, I know the one right
Just
below
just
it is
focus on the first one.
And,
Just
and
focus on the one we're on right now.
And it
Yeah.
said that I think in the function name it said something about no underscores. So I think you'd have to like look to see if there were underscores in the string.
because they took all the underscores and made them spaces.
Where do you? Test returns capitalized string if no underscores. Well, test returns capitalized string if no underscores.
So you'd have to check to see if there were any underscores, and if not,
Well, this text does say that, but all we're asserting is this, so I'm just going to focus on this.
oh okay.
If I was the interviewee and I saw this and my job was to make this test pass, I would not even worry about what that says right there. That's me personally. There's nothing here that makes me have to assert anything else besides just capitalizing that first letter. So that's what I would do. So would you guys have any ideas on how to just capitalize a first letter for this particular thing?
I'm cheating.
Oh, really? Don't cheat.
I'm googling. Like
We can Google how to capitalize something, but in terms of just building, given a string, capitalizing that first letter, what would you guys do?
Oh, without like a function.
Yeah.
You can use a function, but just like pseudocode without any like actual code. What would you do? Would you loop through it and then?
If the first letter in the array is 0, or its position is 0,
Mhm.
if it is not capital, then you need to capitalize it.
Okay. And then, so this string right here, every parameter you send into a function is immutable, meaning you cannot change it. So what you would have to do is create a copy of it somehow, and then modify the copy, and then send the copy back out, or something like that. Or you could build it from scratch. You could do a for loop, and start with an empty string and start taking the first letter, copy to the new string. Second letter, copy to the new string. So those are two things you could do. I'm going to do the second one, and we're going to do copy of param is equal to empty string. And then we'll do a for loop for 0 to less than 4 index in. So that's a Swift for loop, and that should loop from 0. Oops, that's a O. That should loop from 0 to that last index of param.
Like that length or something.
Yes, correct.
TH.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you call it.
There you go.
Count.
Yeah, it's actually not finding it right here. So I think in like JavaScript it would be length, but in Swift it's count.
Okay.
So here's one interesting thing. The parameter I'm taking in is optional. So I have to take that into account. If you look at the unit tests, the first one is you give it a nil, it returns an empty string. So we can't just take the parameter as it's given to us. If we're given nil, which technically is nothing, it's like the nothingness of a computer, we're still returning something. So we can't take in nothing and return something. So do you guys have any ideas on what we can do here to return something? If we're given nothing, we still have to return something, like this thing right here. You guys have any ideas of what we would do?
We should do an if statement
Mhm.
to check for nil, and if it is
Yeah, just check if it's there. So if param is nil, my computer freezes. Return empty string. You can do that, and then here you can. Now we know that we've checked nil. You can bang it here. This will work perfectly. What is a little bit more readable is you check for nil this way. I believe we've done guard statements in the past. And what guard statements allow you to do is it acts as a filter. So your function takes in a parameter, and guard statements will filter out the bad stuff and return immediately, so that this stuff is like the good stuff. Like I said, I think before, like if you're given a bag of Skittles and your guard statement is anything that gets past this point has to be a blue Skittle, it'll filter out all the other color Skittles, and then anything beyond that will be a blue Skittle. So in this particular case, we are guarding anything that gets past this statement. The param will be something. In this particular case, param is nil, so we will return empty string. So this does the same thing as this, but what's nice about the way I did it is you don't have to bang this down here. Do you guys have any questions about that? Yes? No?
I have the question. About
Sure.
How can you declare? Because I've seen this.
Oh, sure.
It's the same variable name.
It is the same variable name, but to the compiler, it's different. But if you want it to be a little bit more readable or something like that, you can rename it so that this one's a little bit different. You could rename it unwrapped parameter. And this one, it's unwrapping it. So this is like, I think of it as like a Christmas box where you have a box and you're given a box of a type. So this type is a string. The string could be anything or it could be nothing. This is literally just checking, opening the Christmas present up and making sure that there's something in it, as opposed to absolutely nothing. If there's absolutely nothing, we're going to return with empty string.
Okay, so it's actually the same variable.
It is not the same variable. This variable is different than this variable. They just happen to have the same name. This thing right here is going to point to a different memory block than this one is. If that makes any sense. Like this is different than this.
So then below, if you refer to param, aren't you going to get a compiler because it's not going to know which one?
No, that's the thing. The compiler is smart enough that, like Swift, the Swift compiler knows exactly what you mean, basically. I don't know why they did it that way, why they didn't force you to rename it. I know it causes some confusion, but it is different. It's because in this language, you're going to be checking for nil. Like every single language, you have to check for nil. Anytime you create a new var in JavaScript, like a new property, it initializes itself to nothing, which is nil or null, I believe, in JavaScript. So you still have to unwrap your presence in JavaScript. You just have to do it in a different way. Swift is smart enough to know that it's a different way of doing it. So I'm just going to keep that. So now we're dealing with the unwrapped version of this guy. So now we know that it has something. So here's the copy of param, and I'm going to do for index in 0 to the unwrapped param.count, and I'm going to copy of param plus equal unwrapped parameter index. So this, I think, will compile. And I'm going to end up returning the copy. Build failed. Subscript is unavailable. Cannot subscript.
Index.
Why is this still here? So it should be work. This should work if we're on Swift 4. Oh, does anyone have a charger by any chance?
I don't have that kind.
Who's this? Oh, is that not a charger?
It's
For
USB-C.
you, the new one?
Yeah.
That's fine. So Swift version. Swift. Swift 4.0.
Minus one. Like when you're looking through the letters, don't you, like if you just do a count minus one or
You can.
yeah, like at the end of your for loop on that line 19, can you do count minus one? Because aren't you know what I mean? If it's like a 5-letter word, you want to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
Right.
Or,
Mhm.
Oh, but you're less than.
Yeah, that's why that's why I did less than. We could also do exactly what you were saying. Thank you, Todd. I thought in Swift 4 you didn't have to do that. It's acting like Swift 3 is the issue, I feel like. Swift 4, they changed this, so you don't get this error anymore. So we're just going to have to... Man. That's what I was just doing. It is in Swift 4. This was part of the headache that I had to go through when I did my interview at Monsanto. Is Swift is not great with strings. Versions 1 through 4. 4, they did change it, and I don't know why it's not compiling. Why am I getting this error? I think it's just crazy right now. Just copy out the offending line of code and see if it compiles so I can get rid of this thing. Build succeeded. So I'm just going to Google this error. Oh. Oops. Subscript is unavailable. And I'm just going to Google this. Oh, I'm not. Swift 3 and Xcode 8 subscript is unavailable. Swift subscript is unavailable. So Hmm. I guess you can't do that. Subscripting a string with int has never been available in Swift standard library. This code has been invalid for as long as Swift exists.
I think you could do it, but
You don't think you can do
I
it?
don't think you could.
It's an array. I don't see why not. They changed it to a collection in Swift 4, but I guess, like, I did it. I don't know what I did with it. All right. So it looks like we have to create an index. This is, I can't believe it's still a big of a pain. So I already have index. So I have to create an index from unwrap parameter.index of string.index. Okay. So if that's start. Wow. I have to grab the start index. And then I want it to go over 1, I believe. And so now I have an index. Now, can I do this? Can I convert it? Okay. Can I convert value of type character to expected argument type string? Oh. So this is an end index. And we still have to do basically a range. So instead of doing this guy, we have to create a string from the start index to the end index. So it's this guy. And it has to go to the end index. So this right here that goes into this is called a range. And so I am trying to just grab the first one. So I'm trying to do from 0 to hopefully that's just 1. So let's just build it. For number, oh. I don't want to just grab 1. I want to grab the start index would be on the first one, it's 0, and then I want to increase it by 1. So the start index will be increased by, oh my god, how do I add those? So this thing right here, I can't add them together because this thing is some crazy thing called string.index, which happens to be this thing, string.index. And this is what you're literally going to have to do in front of a room full of people, is struggle with this, because most interview questions have you changing and manipulating strings for whatever reason. It's what it is.
Are you able to Google?
Yep. This is
But like in the interview.
Yep.
Okay.
So you're going to be sitting there doing exactly what I'm doing, reading through Stack Overflow and trying to manipulate a darn string because it's so hard in Swift.
Them all staring at you.
Yep. Just exactly what you guys are doing right now. Only it's going to be you sitting there sweating with your palms sweating. So it'll be fun. You should look forward
Are your
to.
palms sweating right now?
Oh. I am really starting to get mad that this is still hard because they should have. I could have sworn they made this easier. What's your one-line solution? Oh no, I don't want your one-line solution.
Does it start with a? Oh.
Does it start with a foo bar?
Does it start with an F?
It just sounds like something you'd say to somebody. Oh, I got a one-line solution for you.
Probably.
It starts with an F. Ends with a U. Oh.
It's just like a character. That's just what they named it. So that will bring out found character, this found character, found
This is awful.
I just googled for exactly the answer, like how to loop through a string. Would this help you? Like how to loop through each character of the string, or is that not it?
Yeah. Oh, fine. For number in. Yeah, because we're looping through the count and trying to access the index of an array. Um, so yeah, you can just loop through the characters in param. See if this works. It's not.
Okay. Well, it only printed it out like in a string interpretation.
Yeah. So strings in Swift are built up of something called a character, and characters are like I don't know. They could be. They're what's known as ANSCII characters, and so an emoji is a character. So it's not just straight up letters. It could be any of these things, and these are all built up of characters. So anytime you send an emoji to someone from iOS to Android, what's actually happening under the covers is the Android is reading that character and displaying it to them as their known emoji. So their smiley face isn't exactly like ours. And so I can't just assign a character to a string. I have to convert character to string. What? Control Command Spacebar. Character dot to string. Oh. Wow. String dot value of char. So I do know how to convert a character to a string.
Just wrap it in a string literal.
All right, so how are you going to capitalize the first one? I think what we can do is there's something called enumerated, which allows in this for loop you'll get the index and you'll also get the character. So here we can check if the index is equal to 0, then just capitalize this thing. Else, oops, we want whatever the string is given to us. So we'll go back to our original unit tests and let's see if it works.
Does it matter which unit test you click on to run it?
Oh, so this runs this unit test, this runs this unit test, this runs the entire class.
Gotcha.
So I just ran this, and so it'll run all of them. So now we have 3 of them. The last 2 convert underscores to spaces. So
And change the. Well, we already figured out how to change the capital letters.
yep, that's exactly what we said. It just took a long time because string manipulation. So
So now you just got to convert underscores to spaces
mhm.
without messing all the other stuff up.
Yep.
Can you just like add another, like as your add another?
Yeah,
I
no.
can picture the code, but like you know, like after you do your first 2 tests, then
Mhm.
if your character equals underscore,
Mhm.
that there?
Yeah, you can do. You can check the character. You can also string has something called contains. But what I was gonna have for an assignment is just to get the last 2 to pass. Get these last 2 guys to pass. So I can upload this if you guys want. If you guys want to work on it, me and Todd can help you guys. But I just want you guys to be able to see the project itself and be able to run the test yourself. So I'll upload this real quick. Does anyone have any questions on something they're working on while I upload this?
You should have a card file. If you have your card file stored like